speaking of things that are irrelevant, baseball. So you have been very hot. You have been very hot about, sorry, Alex, but you have been very hot about something that's been happening in baseball. So to bring the listeners forward a little bit, the last time we talked about baseball, your cousin was on here and was part of the cacophony of gas bags because of his absolutely terrible prediction that the Philadelphia Phillies were going to be shown what's up by the St. Louis Cardinals, who were basically swept out of the playoffs unceremoniously. And during that episode, I pressed him as a young person who's a baseball fan, which is really an anomaly about baseball has trouble evolving because I think there's so many factors about the way that the game is and their inability and really unwillingness to become progressive. And so this year they're trying a few things. And this is part of the collective bargaining agreement, or at least some of them have been, where they're banning the shift. They're trying different things. In the COVID shortened season, in extra innings, there was one out and somebody was already on second base, something like that, trying to speed the game along because baseball is the only sport that doesn't have a clock. It's the only major sport in our country that doesn't have a clock. They're trying to change that by adding this pitch clock, which they're now using in spring training. It's been used in the minor leagues, and there have been some hiccups. But before we get into that, I want to give you the runway to have a rant because apparently you are very, very heated about this very innocent pitch clock.
I'm absolutely heated about it because all I see on the internet are people saying things like, if you like the pitch clock, then you don't understand baseball. I think that is absolute bullshit. Are they saying, why are you trying to shorten? Why are you trying to get less baseball? Listen, morons, like it's 27 outs still. It's still 27 outs. It's not less baseball. You know what it is? It's less batting glove and cup adjusting. That's what it is. And I don't understand why we have to let a guy step out of the box, unfreaking Velcro his batting gloves 10 times, step back in, dig in, get set, grab his dick, and get his bat in the proper spot. I have no idea why this must be allowed. I don't understand. And yes, people right now are going to try to find ways to manipulate the pitch clock. I saw Matt Scherzer the other day, or Max Scherzer, or Matt did an excellent job. I mean, because the second I believe that clock starts, the moment you're set, you can deliver as long as the batter's in the box or something. And the batter's allowed one basically timeout. So he got on the rubber immediately, and then he just waited, made the batter take his timeout. Guy steps out of the box, he gets right back on the rubber, and like the second the guy's in the box, he throws the pitch. But hey, you know what? Find a way to use the rules to your advantage. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I'm sure batters will find a way to use it to their advantage as well. And the other thing is this: the game cannot survive on diehard fans alone. And it just can't at this point. And I'm sorry, but unless you can bring in the casual fan, the game's going to die. It cannot it can't stay the same. If it stays the same, it is going to die a slow and painful death, which might be appropriate considering the way they want to play the game, apparently. I don't know why there's such a resistance to any sort of evolution in this game. I do not. I talk to people because now, right, they officially have the DH in both leagues now, right? I feel like this is something I should know, but
Yes, they do.
okay. And I talked to people who said, "Oh, the second he did this, I'm never watching baseball again." They still watch baseball, right? I mean, that's so dumb. It's a better brand of baseball. Like, I get it's fun once in a while to see the pitcher get up there and take a couple of hacks, but for the most part, nobody wants to watch a guy that never practices batting get in there and try to hit. I mean,
Who can be
I get
hurt
there's some
too.
fun to it. Sure, yeah. And you're paying those guys way too much to get hurt legging out a grounder to third, you know?
Not everybody's Shohei Ohtani.
No, no. I guarantee you, if there's a pitcher who's a great hitter like Shohei Ohtani, they'll find a way to put the bat in his hands. If they feel like he can help them at the plate, they'll find a way to get him there. But it's just not going to be the case 99% of the time. And it's a better brand of baseball, like I said. They have to do something to speed the game up. I get that it's kind of leisure, baseball's very leisurely and all that stuff. It's still going to be. It's still going to take nearly 3 hours to play a baseball game, but there's no reason why we have to stand around for 1 or 2 minutes in between pitches and stuff like that. I mean, that's absurd.
There's so many things to unpack here. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying because I have been a fervent advocate that baseball needs to update for the times because the consumer that it's trying to reach is a younger consumer. And in order to reach a younger consumer, You need to cater to very, very, very short attention spans. And you and I know about this because as an hour-long program, we're actually stretching the limits of what we can expect people to tune into on a weekly basis. My assumption is that most people tune into our show in pieces because that's what they have time for. And I don't think it's a matter of games taking 3 hours, but the NFL, no matter what length or what part of the season that they are in, postseason, regular season or not, the games all usually take generally the same amount of time. When baseball has meaningful games, these games sometimes stretch out to 4.5 hours. That's a lot for a sport that doesn't have action. And football has what, 15 minutes of action in 3 hours? And yet somehow we're still watching it because the action is fast paced and the game has evolved. One thing baseball doesn't do very well at all is when the game itself, the play on the field, updates and evolves, they as a league are not meeting that same challenge. And I think you're seeing that here because hitters are getting paid to hit home runs. And as a result, there's less balls in play every single year. Alex can debate me on that if he wants to, but the stats are in my favor. And they're striking out a lot more. In order to strike out, you need at least 3 pitches. And nowadays, hitters are working the count. So we're talking 9, 10 pitch at bats. They're trying to get the pitcher out of there. That takes time. You can't take that part of it out. So you have to do something in the margins to do it. And the pitch clock, to your point, is basically making it so that the batter can only grab his dick one time. The point you made
Yes.
about the point you made about Max Scherzer though, that actually was an issue because collectively bargained is the safety part of it. The batter and the hitter have to make eye contact as sort of a mutual, we're both ready for this. And I could see there being some safety issues there. But the part of baseball that I think is the biggest issue is these unwritten rules. And until we get out of that and we actually think progressively, it won't make baseball any less pastimey than it already is. But if they don't do something, it will be a literal pastime in that we will not even have it anymore. It will be an extinct sport because the sports like the NBA and even the NHL, which is regional, are going to pass it because they are evolving along with the play on the field.
I agree, and I do think there are some interesting counterpoints that could be made. Like you mentioned, in a football game, there's only maybe 15 minutes of actual action that takes place, and that's absolutely true. But I guess we just accept it because we love the game so much, maybe. But then look at a sport like soccer that is basically live. The clock is running the whole time. It's basically constant action, but it's boring as shit to somebody that's not really into soccer. And people, it's the most popular sport in the world. So
By
I just
far.
think the one thing I think is what they're doing doesn't take away from what makes baseball baseball. I mean, it doesn't take away from the actual action of the game at all, in my opinion. In football, there's a play clock. They can't stand there at the line of scrimmage for 5 minutes deciding what play they want to run or what's best versus what coverage. They've got a play clock. They've got to have the ball snapped on time or take a timeout. And when they're out of timeouts, they don't have a choice but to snap the ball. Period. It's just the nature of the sport. It forces there to be breaks in between plays because the way the sport's played.
But to go back to the universal DH, and you mentioned that, which is something that we haven't even talked about, more players like Shohei Ohtani can actually exist in the game with this new rule. And what does baseball need? They need more Shohei Ohtanis. That guy is doing things that haven't been done since Babe Ruth, who is the unanimous best player to ever play. Like he is the poster for Major League Baseball in terms of Hall of Famers. And don't you want that out of your game? Don't you want those guys to come in and change the sport generationally? Look at what we're getting in the NFL. Right now, the crop of quarterbacks, we are going away from Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, and we're going to guys like Patrick Mahomes. Those guys are electric. They're changing the sport in front of us, and that's why people are gravitating toward it. Shohei Ohtani could do that. Baseball sucks at marketing its players. So why don't you let these players do more? Let them be more dual use. Can you imagine what it would be like if we had more guys like that? I know the novelty would wear off, but man, it's just so cool to think about the sport evolving to the point where every team has a Shohei Ohtani, not just the league has one.
No, absolutely. And I think about in regards to the pitch clock and what you're saying, maybe having the pitch clock may create a better opportunity for some pitchers. There may be some pitchers out there that gain an advantage from this. There may be guys that end up having a good long career because of the pitch clock that wouldn't have otherwise somehow. And that might be a little strange to think, but just the fact of giving the hitter less time to think or process about what pitch is coming. I'm curious to see how it changes offensive baseball because you've got to get your signs in faster, I'm assuming, especially with runners on base, communicating what you want to try to do pitch to pitch. It could create some interesting situations. It could create some opportunities for other players to, I think the ones that embrace it the most instead of bitching about it have a higher chance of being successful. And like you said, it gives a player an opportunity to, sort of evolve and grow and change the game.
Baseball needs to do it. I mean, I do love watching baseball, but it used to never be a slog, and now it is, and what sucks is it takes away all the things about baseball that are so nuanced, and maybe nuance isn't what people want anymore, but if you have watched baseball for as long as I have, you know how many things are happening just in between every single pitch, and you and I put some of that onus on analytics, and there is something to be said about analytics, but we've talked about that with all sports, that it needs to be a combination, and analytics have gotten to the point for some clubs and organizations where that's basically a computer running that team. And that's not what you want. You need to have a little bit more of that human touch. But there's so many things happening. All the signs, when they are talking about pitches, the pitches are determined based off of watching that film. And we don't know that because that's not something you can see. In a football broadcast, you're talking about looking at Andy Reid with his giant Waffle House menu, and you know all these things are happening on the sideline, the calls that they're making. We get mic'd up for sound with the NFL films people, and we don't get that with Major League Baseball. We don't get any of that. And so all those nuances are lost on the audience. And so if you're not going to show those things and you're not going to be a little bit take a little bit more of a deep dive into your sport, you need something to make it more interesting. And I just feel like the pitch clock, it's going to have some growing pains, but you go through those growing pains now in March so that you don't have them in October and some stupid shit that costs something a World Series or maybe in a playoff game or something like that. And I think that it's just part of what we have to accept as sports fans. If we love this sport, it needs to evolve. If you're not willing to get on board with that, you might as well start planning for the funeral now because it is inevitable that these other sports are going to engulf baseball.
Yeah, I think so too. And kind of you mentioned miking up. It brought up a great idea. I think that it's a money-making idea for
Oh,
Major League Baseball or even other sports. Mic up the umpires and make it available on a pay-per-view channel for people to listen to. Now, I'm sure there's probably CBA reasons why they could never do that, but to hell with that. Violate the contract. Mic up the umpires. I want to hear the arguments. I want to hear every word. Hell, do it in every sport. Mic up the hockey referees and the NFL referees and the umpires in baseball, the referees in the NBA. Mic them all up, make people pay a little extra to watch it and hear it. I'm here for it.
you always have these like half cocked ideas, like you're out here thinking that we're going to monetize in this way. Let me ask you though, if you were to name the least interesting set of referees or officials in the major sports in this country, which ones do you think would be the least interesting, at least in terms of being mic'd up?
The least interesting in terms of being mic'd up.
I
I
mean,
think NBA.
you think so? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of jarring that happens in the NBA games. Like, I feel like those officials don't take anything because they know they have the power of the technical foul at their disposal. Hockey referees, a lot of them are Canadian. They're so nice.
Yeah, but have you ever watched any hockey mic'd up videos and the trash talk and stuff that goes on between those guys?
That's a good
Like,
point.
it's unique. I mean, and it's not even necessarily bad. Some of it's just flat out funny. Like there's one guy that must have been on another team or maybe whatever. The guy on the other team was renting a place from him somewhere.
Oh, that's
And
great.
he's like, and he's sitting there. He's like, "Hey, man, when are you gonna pay rent or some shit like or whatever?" Like during a face off, he's like asking him a question, or he's like, "If you do this, I'll evict you," or whatever. Like it just goofy stuff like that. I think's funny. And then obviously, I think some of the stuff you would hear in baseball and in the NFL would be entertaining.
I just miss the day where managers and umpires hated each other. Like, I want to bring back Lou Piniella kicking dirt on home plate, stuff like that. We need more of that. We don't see a whole bunch of that. We're too nice in sports now. We always have to be nice to everybody and everything. There's no more rivalries anymore. Bring in the microphones. I want to hear these umpires talk shit about hitters. I want to hear them say things like, I know this guy's going to swing at the outside pitch, so I'm going to call these pitches on the outside. That's why I don't want robo umps 100% because we need a little bit of that vindictive son of a bitch umpire out there calling a wide strike zone.
Yeah, I would love it. I mean, the reason is that society's too soft, right? Society can't handle the things that they would hear. That's the issue with it. And even I think that's why you've seen some of it tamped down as far as the intensity is because there's so much blowback that comes from some of these outbursts and stuff that happens. But I'm with you on the robot umpires. I'm not a fan of it. I think you need to keep human umpires, especially for balls and strikes and things like that. Just hold them more accountable for
Hmm.
being shitty. And I think that's what you need to do. If they suck, you need to like make it known. And I'm sure they do to some degree, but I mean, really find a way, whether it's through fines or suspensions or whatever, but keep the human being there, but stick it to them when they're shitty.
I mean, to be fair, we go through assessments in our jobs where we are assessed as to whether we're doing well or whether we're not doing well. And we've talked about that with the NFL, where there's been a lot of calls that have been questionable. And we wonder, is there some type of a quality check? Are they being held accountable? Or is somebody going over these games and being like, this is a place you could definitely improve on? Maybe they are. But I think you're right. I think robo umps add an element to the game that don't need to be a physical part of the game, but can definitely become a way to make it so that the umpires are being better and more accountable at their job. Now, there's a lot of union things that happen in all of that because the umpires have their own union and everything. But if it were me and this was something that would make me better at my job, wouldn't I want to get better at my job? But maybe some of these umpires, because of that lack of accountability, they don't have any incentive to get better because they feel like what they're doing has worked because nobody has told them different.
Well, and part of it too, I think, and I'm sure you can find it somewhere that it's available, but I think it should be like readily available. Talked about on the broadcast, like put it up on the jumbotron at the game. Like we know what every team's ranked. We
Jesus.
know what every team's offense is ranked, every team's defense is ranked. We know where every player stands. Like I'm literally umpire that put a number next to their name. Like you've got these four guys today. This guy is the number four best umpire, and all the umpires. This guy is number 12, and then you've got Angel Hernandez, who's the worst, right at number 75 or something like that. Like just ridicule them publicly.
You are one petty son of a bitch. Let's go to OTW.